William and Jane had been together for over a decade, their love story beginning on a trekking adventure that led to marriage when he was just 23 and she was 25. They built a life together, raising a son, and for years, William never had a reason to question his wife's loyalty. Jane was charming, a smooth talker, and outwardly a devoted wife and mother. She even extended her kindness to my own family, offering support to my wife who was battling breast cancer. To everyone around her, Jane seemed like the perfect partner. But over a year ago, William confided in me that something had changed. Jane had grown distant, cold even. She became obsessively private with her phone, and their once loving marriage had turned into a mere formality. Intimacy had disappeared. For 6 long months she refused his advances, always claiming exhaustion or a need for space. Even on their wedding anniversary she returned home at 4 in the morning, offering no real explanation. The signs were obvious, but William, blinded by love, refused to see them. When he first shared his concerns, I immediately suspected she was seeing someone else. I told him as much, but he shook his head, unwilling to believe that Jane, his Jane, could betray him. He held on to the illusion that she was still the woman he fell in love with. But the cracks were showing. Even my wife noticed that Jane had stopped visiting her as often. Sensing something was off, my wife decided to subtly probe for information. After a carefully worded conversation with Jane, she reported back to me, Jane had been spending time with a man, a mechanic. She insisted their relationship was purely platonic, but I knew better. So did my wife. I urged William to hire a private investigator, someone who could uncover the truth that he was too afraid to face. He hesitated at first, but eventually, desperation won. For 3 months the investigator found nothing. Then, finally, a breakthrough, a single photograph. Jane walking hand in hand with another man as they left a theater. It wasn't definitive proof of an affair, but it was enough to shatter William. He called me that night, his voice hollow, and when I saw him he looked like a man who had lost everything. Sitting across from me at a dimly lit bar, he forced a smile and asked, "What did I do wrong?" The pain in his eyes was unbearable. I knew he was on the edge, drowning in betrayal. That night I didn't let him drink alone. The days that followed were dark for William, but he wasn't alone. Our friends rallied around him, offering support, reminding him of his worth. Slowly he began to see Jane for who she really was. And then something shifted. Instead of wallowing in his pain, he chose to move on. If Jane could betray him, then why should he remain faithful to a marriage that had already crumbled? At work, he met Helena, a younger woman with striking features. Sharp, confident, almost like a spy character from a video game. Their attraction was instant, electric. She became his escape and soon his lover. With Helena, he rediscovered the passion and excitement that Jane had long deprived him of. He was happy, genuinely happy for the first time in years. He barely thought about Jane anymore. But Jane noticed. She saw the change in him, how he no longer begged for her attention, how he seemed indifferent to her presence. And it scared her. One day she confronted me, asking if William was seeing someone. I played dumb, feigning ignorance. Then on Christmas Jane finally broke down. She confessed everything to William, how she had been having an affair for over a year, how she now realized how precious their marriage was, how she wanted him back. William didn't react the way she expected. He didn't cry or shout. He simply asked for details, his face unreadable. Desperate, she admitted it all. It had started with a simple car breakdown, a chance meeting with a mechanic who made her feel young again. One thing led to another, and soon they were sneaking around, indulging in a passionate, illicit affair. She was with him on their son's birthday. She was with him on their wedding anniversary, spending the entire day in bed with her lover while William waited at home, heartbroken. She had even taken him to an apartment, a secret hideaway for their encounters. Hearing this, William finally snapped. He called her every vile name he could think of, his voice shaking with fury. But Jane wasn't done groveling. She dropped to her knees, clutching his legs, pleading for forgiveness. "Think about our son," she begged. "We can be a family again. I'll do anything." But William saw through her. He knew the truth, she wasn't sorry for betraying him. She was only sorry because her affair had fallen apart. The mechanic, her so-called soulmate, had dumped her just a week before Christmas. Now that she had no one, she wanted William back. He told her, cold and final, that she was dead to him. Jane didn't take rejection well. She attempted to end her own life, an act of desperation meant to pull William back in. But even as she lay in the hospital, he refused to visit. He had nothing left for her, not love, not sympathy. When she was discharged, she returned to their home, hoping for another chance. This time William played along. He needed more than just her confession. He needed undeniable proof. In our country, adultery isn't an automatic reason for divorce unless there is solid evidence. Without it, he would lose everything. So he let her talk, let her believe that if she was honest he might reconsider. And as soon as she finished spilling every sordid detail, he left her with nothing but silence. In the end, Jane lost everything. William, however, walked away, free, victorious, and finally at peace. William had moved on, at least in his own way, but he wasn't ready to let Jane off the hook so easily. He had no intention of giving her the divorce she begged for, not because he wanted her back, but because he refused to let her walk away without consequence. He set strict rules and she had no choice but to follow them. The house was now her responsibility. Cleaning, laundry, and every household chore fell on her shoulders. She had to obey his every demand without question, always be available whenever he wanted intimacy, and submit to whatever he desired. Every one of her emails, phone accounts, and passwords had to be accessible to him. There were no secrets anymore, not for her. But even with her compliance, William was cold. He no longer saw her as a wife, barely even as a person. After sex, he would kick her out of their bed, telling her it was his space and she could sleep in the guest room. His words were sharp, cutting. He no longer addressed her with affection but called her by her first name, barking orders and cursing at her over the smallest mistakes. Some nights he wouldn't even come home, spending his time elsewhere. Jane soon discovered where he really was. She confronted him, demanding to know the truth, and he didn't bother lying. "The door's open," he told her coldly. "You can leave if you want." But she didn't. She stayed, enduring his cruelty as if punishing herself for her past sins. Desperate for guidance, she often visited my wife, seeking advice on how to repair their shattered marriage. My wife, kind-hearted as ever, listened, offering gentle words, though it pained her to see Jane in such misery. Jane confided that William barely acknowledged her existence. She was no longer his wife, just someone who lived under his roof. He rejected her touch, never let her sleep beside him, and when she tried to rekindle any semblance of warmth, he mocked her. One night, she dressed up, hoping to entice him, to remind him of the woman he once loved. But he only laughed, told her to grow up, and walked away. He had Helena now. A younger, vibrant woman who fulfilled every role Jane no longer could. He spoke of Jane with nothing but disdain, calling her an old cow, comparing her unfavorably to Helena, who, in his eyes, was superior in every way. But Jane's suffering reached new depths when she learned William was taking a business trip with Helena. It shattered her. He lied, of course, claiming they were just colleagues, but I knew the truth. We all did. The final blow came at the company party. It was an event where we were expected to bring our spouses, and Jane had clung to the hope that this could be a moment of reconciliation. But William crushed that hope with a single sentence: "We need to work things out." And then he attended the party alone, or rather not alone but with Helena. They weren't officially together, not in public, but they moved like a couple, shared secret smiles, whispered conversations. The connection between them was undeniable. William had already decided his future. He told Helena he would leave Jane when their son turned 18. He told me the same. Until then, he would remain in this twisted, broken marriage, bound not by love but by obligation. He didn't care about money, but he refused to lose his son. Jane, meanwhile, became nothing more than a ghost in his life. He never laid a hand on her, never physically hurt her, but his words were weapons sharp enough to wound. When she failed to clean the table properly, he sneered, "Maybe your mechanic can do it for you." When she hesitated in the bedroom, he reminded her of her infidelity, of the way she betrayed him, making sure she carried the weight of her guilt every second of the day. I don't know how this will end. Perhaps William stayed only for his son, waiting for the day he could finally walk away without looking back. But in the process he had become something else entirely. Not just a man scorned, but a man who had lost any warmth he once had. And Jane, once so confident in her choices, now lived in misery, seeking comfort in my wife's kindness, while the man she once loved made sure she would never forget what she had done.